and study with different teachers about this teaching and practice called the 5 faculties. And at first it just looked like, oh, another one of these items with a list that just kind of goes right by if you're at all familiar with some of these lists that they have. And it's from the Theravada Buddhism. I can only speak of that from my own education. And but looking closer, it really looked like something I could resonate with. I just want to check, did somebody have a question? Was there a hand up? Okay, there was a hand up before.
Yeah, I checked, thank you.
And so I thought I would just kind of weave into it by talking about nature, and that this is a change of the season. We just had our summer solstice here in the northern hemisphere. If there's anybody on Zoom, just by chance, I know it's like the winter solstice in the southern hemisphere. This change, and that there is this change, but it's also a constant change. And it kind of brings up this first category, which I'll talk in more detail, basically about confidence. That like I just have this confidence that summer solstice was coming, and the longest day of the year, and so it's kind of a way of looking at it, and just in terms of nature, like. Also related to the weather in Los Angeles, there was May gray. Where I lived, there was May gray, and I think there was like clouds all the way from like November all the way until the beginning of June. But there was, we call it officially May gray and June gloom, and kind of having a trust, like another word related to confidence, that it was going to lift, that there was going to be days where there would be sun, like where we're at now. And anybody else just curious, this idea of there could be confidence or just this kind of trust about the weather, that it was going to shift into sunnier days. Just anybody show of hands maybe? Confident that the weather was going to change eventually? Yeah, or trust, maybe trust. Oh, I trust this is going to happen. Kind of like, for me, it's also related to a belief. Like, I believe the weather is going to change. I really do believe it. And it's based on evidence from my own life. I'm an adult. I've seen it happen a lot of times. Didn't want to get really tangled in or too much into about climate change more. Of course, there are climate change, I acknowledge, and it's a really serious, critical issue. But just generally speaking, that the weather changes, and that can be expected at some point, even though it might be different. Certainly where we live, if we're just staying in one place, and LA County is huge, there's so many varied types of weather if you live in this region. But having some trust is going to change, your belief is going to change. And another word could be faith. Faith that there's natural rhythms of nature, that there's seasons that change. They vary, but they're always going to come and go. And so I wanted to kind of end with the word faith because related to these 5 faculties, sometimes the first one is referred to as confidence, but oftentimes it's referred to as faith. And it's a kind of faith. Once I say faith, if I say that first, there's risk. But we're here in this, this space which is also used for a chapel, I'm sure for various other types of spiritual traditions. But the word faith oftentimes conjures up all kinds of religious connotations. I don't know what goes through your mind and heart, but this is kind of faith that I've learned from different Buddhist teachers is not one that is based on a dogma or a higher power, although there may be many different aspects to Buddhist traditions where people do have these certain beliefs. But this is I'm just being specific in this context, that this idea of belief is based on direct experience, and the direct experience that something has been attained or acquired, or it could be from our own direct experience. We know that there's May gray, June gloom, or one example might be I have confidence or faith or belief that if I turn on the water, that there's going to be water come out of the spigot. So it's just another definition of the word faith, not based on, certainly there's magnificent engineering and there's certainly nature and all kinds of things behind where the water comes from. This idea of something that comes from within, something that we actually might be able to direct or control, that it's not predetermined. So it's this idea of confidence, and that we could see it in nature, in the passing of nature. An example, I'm going to read this. Sharon Salzberg, who's a Western Buddhist teacher, wrote a book called Faith. And the whole book was kind of about this, about redefining faith or educating people about faith from this point of view. And so I'll just read, faith transcends mere belief. Faith transcends dogma. And then she views faith as a refuge, one that can be cultivated through practice and self-awareness. It's rather than a blind adherence to a higher power, it's a profound trust in our own inner wisdom and the interconnectedness of all life, or nature. And so this idea of confidence or trust or belief and faith, you might see it in nature, see it every day, and something that we might be able to cultivate for ourselves. And then to relate to persistence, this idea, just related to nature, that the seasons are pretty persistent, we can't stop them. That there's this energy that's happening with the earth that's constantly rotating, and then it's rotating around the sun in this most amazing way. There's a persistence, and how that relates to all the different, incredible growing and changing in nature, whether it's a change of the seasons or what flowers are coming up, or what critters are moving around, or when it's time for certain plants and animals to regenerate or to die or to give birth. I know in my neighborhood there's a little patch of woods. I live right near Silver Lake. There's a patch of woods where there were these owls that had babies. You hear them at night, like hoo, 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 but never can see them. Sometimes we see them in the silhouette on the top of the tree, but never see them until this spring when they were having babies. They were out in the nest, so they were out in the open. And this is the time of year that we would see nesting birds and hummingbirds, different kind of birds, feeding their little babies. And so there's all this energy and all these changes that are occurring. So this idea of it seems like there's a persistence, even when we talk about all the things that are changing from the climate, or there's maybe, here we had colder weather, some places have warmer weather, that there's still this persistence of life and nature, and how there seems to be this interconnectedness, there seems to be unspoken awareness. I know I'm at awe with nature personally, so seeing that there seems to be this mesh or this interconnection, it's really remarkable and beautiful, and something that's related to the moon phases and the tides and the whole life universe and the oceans underwater. We don't really, unless we're people who study the ocean, even get to see that vast amount of life underneath there. I know when I go snorkeling that is something remarkable to me. It's like I could just drive by the ocean all the time. It's really pretty and it's beautiful and it makes sounds and I love it. But then to go snorkeling and just to see all that life, and then to imagine all the way out into the horizon, there's this whole universe of life and persistence and energy that's continuing. And there does seem to be, even if things are, whether it's natural or unnatural, there seems to be a balance that nature tries to keep balancing as if it has some intelligence. It seems to be like the gravity and the sun and all the weather seem to be finding balance, and all these creatures, including ourselves, are living amongst it. So this other component of the 5 faculties that I'm kind of going through with nature is discernment. That constantly seeing that there's change and renewal, like I mentioned. That weather is not fixed, it's not frozen, that it doesn't stay the same. Imagine if it stayed all the same, like all the time. We might be so busy in our lives working on computers and taking care of going to and coming from, that it's sometimes easy to just go past how beautiful things are in the spring and the summer and hear all four seasons. So there's also this time for, as I mentioned before, with like the birds, I was thinking about how there's always spider season. It seems like there's always spider season. But there's a time of year where there's like these spiders who, they weave these really big webs. And then there's another time of year where there's certain spiders who have these little webs. I don't know where they all go on their off season, but it always seems to be spider season, but it's a different kind of spider. I don't know if anyone notices spiders. But different phases of the moon, different constellations. And that with discernment and awareness and curiosity and love for nature, this is something that we could notice and even connect with. I know I haven't attended, but you were just telling me about this moon festival yesterday. That there's like a way to acknowledge and to just acknowledge. This year was a strawberry moon that came one day after the summer solstice, the longest day of the year. So this idea that there's change, always change, and so much beauty and awe. And so we can notice, or we can not notice. This idea of discernment can be a place where we could really notice change in a way in our everyday life as well. Deciding like when it's time to put out umbrellas for the summertime, or when to put out comforters, or when to put them away, this kind of change of seasons. We're discerning and making our own decisions, kind of like our own nature. Also, just to go a little bit more into acknowledging how the 5 faculties can be part of practice. And I mentioned at the beginning, it can be part of formal practice. And a little background more, that there is a term for the 5 faculties that comes from, looks like Sanskrit and similar to the ancient Indian language Pali, that it's called the Indriyas. I kind of really like that word, it just has a nice sound, Indriya. And it means physical strength or ability in general. And for more specifically, this idea of 5 faculties or 5 qualities that we may all have within us. And those are, as I mentioned, and I'll mention again, there's confidence and persistence, mindfulness, concentration, and discernment. And these can all be qualities. It may even be like where we're doing practice, like that they're all like condiments or spices on the spice shelf. That during practice, it's like, oh yeah, I'm feeling a little sleepy, that we could take a little spice rack of energy or persistence and sprinkle a little bit on. That basically, these are actually considered qualities that can be used for helping with their opposites. So if there's confidence, if there is during practice, a lack of confidence, to try to cultivate or to tap into confidence. And that's why even if it's like, I don't really have confidence, it's like, well, taking a posture of confidence. Take a posture of confidence that then the body and the mind may follow. So exploring this idea like, yes, I've had this experience before. This is kind of like an evidence-based faith about my practice. Like, I know the practice can be helpful. My mind wanders, but it's a training. It's a way of calming the mind. It's a way of discovering about myself and just being, taking a practice break, whatever it is for you, to discover that if there is a lack of confidence or doubt, that this can be a way to cultivate confidence. It also is if there's like a sloth or a sleepiness or weariness during practice. Anybody get that? This idea of persistence or energy. It's like, oh, yeah, I can see I'm falling asleep. See if I can bring up some persistence and energy, take some deeper breaths to collect. Sometimes taking some deeper, even a little faster breaths can help develop energy. And then, of course, there's mindfulness, which is this awareness. And these are not necessarily sequential. So awareness can be a modulator. It's like I'm aware that I'm not so confident, or I'm aware that I'm confident. I'm aware that I'm lowering my energy. Oh, so I can be aware that I can raise my energy. And this relates also to concentration. This is the fourth quality of seeing that I'm not so concentrated. Even though I'm feeling my presence, that I could really look to see to be more steady, to sprinkle a little bit of steadiness and concentration. And then this really goes hand in hand with discernment, to discern what's here. And it really does connect with awareness and concentration, energy and confidence, the five together. There's actually a metaphor where the practice is a bit like driving with a cart with four wheels. So that mindfulness is the driver. Mindfulness is this awareness of the event of meditation or practice, and that the confidence and the persistence, the concentration, and the discernment are the four wheels. Yes. So this idea that we can drive, it's almost like driving a little bit, if you want to have a metaphor like this, so that mindfulness is the modulating factor driving these four wheels, and that we could tap into them or check in with them. And it doesn't have to be like a verbal thing, it could just be an unverbal thing. These are like things we might even feel. Feeling a little bit of sleepiness, doubt, or unfocused, and how they might fit together for you in your practice. There's also a balancing factor, that faith and wisdom, this idea of confidence and discernment, these two factors can actually balance each other, as well as the energy or persevering with the concentration. So that one, if we have too much of one, it can be a little bit too much, we can balance with the other. They have balancing factors. Just like how tires in a car can balance, and that mindfulness can modulate all of them. And so there's also this idea of the opposites, as I mentioned. I just will run through that one more time just to be clear, because that can be helpful. That confidence controls doubt. That persistence can help when we're feeling a little bit drowsy. Mindfulness can help when we're kind of losing our mindfulness. It can be like a dropping off. Sometimes that's called heedfulness. I don't really use that word, or maybe carelessness. And then concentration can control when there's distractedness, like that mind wandering, come back to control with a little bit of concentration. And then discernment. This is where probably comes from having a lack of mindfulness, a lack of energy, that we don't really have discernment. And one of the aspects of discernment is what might be beneficial or not beneficial. Let's say my mind starts wandering, for example, and I start thinking about paying bills, or start feeding thoughts about, it just comes out of nowhere, like planning. It could also be self-criticism, where there's like, there's a story of these two wolves sometimes, like fighting in the head, having a little war in the head. It's like noticing all this happening. So this discernment can arise, and then seeing, well, what is a wise thing from this discernment to do? And it may just be to notice. It's like, okay, I don't have to continue. The wisdom and discernment arises that this conversation is going on. I'm in the middle of meditation, and that I can steer myself. It's like, oh, like there's thinking, there's self-criticism. And just acknowledging that with discernment can pull back. It's like, well, like what is a wise thing in this moment to continue this kind of dukkha or suffering of like self-criticism or mind wandering in a way that actually can feel a little bit painful even sometimes. It can happen any time of day really, but to come back, and this is where I mentioned earlier, even to have a moment of coming back to the breath, feeling the body, hearing sounds in the room, or doing even a few phrases of loving kindness or self-compassion. and finding that there is this wise companion that we have, that we can connect with our heartfulness, and this is where that wisdom can come in. This wisdom from our own internal companion, as I mentioned. And so wanting to just kind of transition to this idea of having these 5 qualities in everyday life. And I know for myself, I started to think about it, like, what would that be? I saw some examples. So there's confidence, persistence, mindfulness, concentration, and discernment. And I thought of how many things, I'm not going to go too far into my doubts about things or my insecurities, but I realized, like, this is like such a wonderful list of qualities to cultivate, and if it's not, or to see if they're cultivated. It's like, yes, I'd like to have some confidence around something that I want to take action. And one of the things that can be a place where I get stuck or other people get stuck is doubt. Anybody have that? You just feel stuck. There's doubt. So does confidence sound like a good... And I don't really have a prescription. It's like, how do we become confident? I realized for myself practicing this is like, well, there is this thing of evidence-based faith. I have done this before. Like, I'm doing this talk today. And I have sometimes, like, a little bit of stage fright or something. That might be an example. It's like I have confidence. I have done it before. I can take this posture of confidence. I know I've done it before. I can really acknowledge that there are these sensations. Maybe they're there to protect me in some way. But maybe there's an example in your life where you can, everyday life, where really this idea of even being aware that there can be cultivation of confidence. Just stating the posture, taking the posture of confidence. When you take a posture of confidence when you walk, it's a lot different than taking a posture of, like, not confident. And that can be really beneficial. Like, I used to visit New York City all the time, and I was always told, don't wander, don't look like you're a tourist, so take a posture, like you're confident, you know where you're going. And that can be kind of related to that. Like, confident that the drive is going to go well, that everything is in order, that I've done all the preparation I can, and now I'm just confident and let nature take its course. So this idea of confidence or being persistent, and it's so many things, sometimes not being persistent. It's like starting a new habit, a new routine, or trying to fade an unwanted habit. And this is something I know is really a big issue when it comes to healthcare, like starting a habit of exercise or reducing the habit of eating ice cream or fatty foods. It really depends on your own health situation, of course. This idea of persistence is another quality. So confidence, I can do it. Persistence, I have to keep up with it. I want to keep up with it. It's going to be related to wisdom, that this is actually a prescription for healthiness. And also this absolute powerful quality of mindfulness, to be aware, which is that moderating factor, along with concentration, and as I mentioned, the wisdom component, which is like, is what I'm doing now or will be doing now, or wanting to do, or I've done in the past, is it harmful? Am I making it worse in some way? And is there, putting all of these qualities together, can I have the wisdom, the confidence, the mindfulness, the persistence, the concentration, so I don't make things worse? To see it, like, that's a pretty hard thing to see when our habits or behaviors are making things worse. And so, if that makes any sense to you, I hope there's a little bit of sense that comes in. There might be some examples that you have, like working with doubt, facing unhelpful habits, related to practice in general. And it's really a prescription, in some ways, or spices on the spice rack in our internal kitchen that we can sprinkle on, that's there for self-care and to take action. And it's said that those, and it's probably those who are monastics who are spending their whole life practicing, that those who master these 5 that it really transitions from being called the 5 faculties to the 5 powers. And so that each one of these can be considered a power or even a superpower that we can either cultivate or draw upon. And it's an invitation to consider and to discover for yourself. And so, yeah, thank you for letting me share about that. The 5 faculties. And curious word faculty also, it really means quality or a resource in a sense that is within us.